There we go. And okay, I just have to arrange my screen so I can see better. Okay, so we left off here at the bottom of page 83 in the PDF of the Koran edition, and we were talking about wait. Prophets prophesying to the nations of the world. And it was just a tangent about these prophets. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So let's just go right into it. We don't need to go backwards. The Gemara raises an objection for what is taught in a different Baraita. There was a certain pious man among the nations of the world, and his name was Job, and he came into the world only to receive his reward. So I guess there's a question about who Job was in the Bible. It's an important book in the Bible. It's a book about good and evil, and how it's understood traditionally. And the question is, who was Job? When did he live? So that's just in general. We have no idea, because there's no other event recorded in the book of Job that places it in a particular historical timeline. So in the Midrash, and I don't think there's Midrash on the book of Job itself, but Midrash about Job and verses from Job are found in other Midrashim. So, in other words, there are whole collections of Midrash on different books of the Bible, but there isn't Midrash just on the book of Job. So, but the rabbis talk about Job a lot and suggest that Job lived in different periods of time. Either he lived in a time of Abraham, or he lived in a time of Moses, or some other time, and we don't know. Maybe he was an advisor to Pharaoh. We don't know who he was, when he lived, and the book also says that he's a righteous man. So if he was a righteous man, how come we don't know anything else about him? Like Abraham we know about, and the Torah gives us context to him. Moses we know about. We have context in the Torah. Job appears in a vacuum, and he has friends. We don't know who the friends are, but they talk to him and have dialogue with him. And also an angel appears in the book of Job that we really don't have evidence of in other books of the Torah, but the Midrash, because that angel, Satan, appears in the book of Job, Midrash has Satan appear at other places. And based on what Satan does in Job, that is, suggests to God that if Job is so righteous, then let's play a trick on him and do some terrible things to him and see if he's really so righteous. And so there's lots of Midrashim about Satan doing that, or appearing in disguise to a variety of other prophets and religious figures in the Bible. There's a classic Midrash about Abraham and Isaac's journey to Mount Moriah, and how Satan appeared in a variety of human, animal, and natural forms. Like Satan appears as a river, to make it hard for Abraham and Isaac to cross the river to continue on the journey. So it's just, the book of Job then serves as a basis for lots of other rabbinic midrash, but the book itself we don't know about. So we would assume, or at least I would assume, that Job was Jewish or an Israelite. Why? Because it would be. There really isn't a book in the Bible that focuses on a non-Jew. You have non-Jews who appear in the Bible, King Achashverosh, Haman, the prophet Balaam, in the Torah, Moses' father-in-law Jethro, but a whole book of the Bible to be about a non-Jew. So that's some of the background for this. So the Gemara raises an objection for what's taught in a different Baraita. There was a certain pious man among the nations of the world, and his name was Job, and he came into the world only to receive his reward. The Holy One, blessed be he, brought afflictions upon him, and he began to blaspheme and curse. The Holy One, blessed be he, doubled his reward in this world in order to expel him from the world to come. This Baraita states that Job was not a Jew, but rather a Gentile. Okay, so the Gemara responds, the matter of whether or not Job was Jewish is a dispute between Tanaim, the rabbis of the time of the Mishnah, as it's taught in a Baraita with regard to the period during which Job lived. Rabbi Elazar says Job lived in the days of the judging of the judges. As it is stated in connection with Job, behold, all you yourselves have seen it. Why then have you become altogether vain? Which generation was completely vain? You must say it was the generation of the judging of the judges, when the people judged the judges, as will be explained shortly. So there's a note, and let's just look at the notes about this and see if it's worth reading. Okay. Dor Shekulo Hevel, generation was completely vain. This can be understood in light of what is stated subsequently in the days of the judging of the judges. The generation judged its own judges as they too were sinful. The Maharal, a rabbi from the Middle Ages, writes that the generation's primary ruin lay in the absence of order and leadership. Every man did what was right in his eyes. And that phrase is repeated a few times throughout the book of Judges. Such a generation deserves to be called completely vain. Okay, so that's the background on why it's vain. A lesson for today, that's right. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says, Job lived in the days of Achashverosh. Okay, see, because the book of Job doesn't say when he lived, that's why the rabbis are surmising from some kind of clues from the book itself as to when that could have been. So this Rabbi Elazar says he must have lived during the time of the judges because of some verse there about altogether vain. And Yehoshua ben Karcha says, no, it must have been during the time of King Achashverosh in the book of Esther, and in all the world were no women found so beautiful as the daughters of Job, right? And how do we know? In which generation were beautiful women sought? You must say it was a generation of Achashverosh, Esther chapter 2, right? The beauty pageant that Achashverosh has to pick a new queen. The Gemara asks, but why not say it was in the days of David, as it's written, and they sought a beautiful maiden in 1 Kings 1, right? When King David's dying, he needs to keep warm, so they want to find a maiden to keep him warm, right? And they bring in Avishag, I think is her name, to be that one. So the Gemara answers there, in the time of David, they searched throughout the territory of Israel, whereas here in the time of Achashverosh, they searched throughout the world, as is similarly stated with regard to Job's daughters, right? Because it says, in all the world, no women found so beautiful as the daughters of Job, and in King Achashverosh, the whole world. Well, it was all of the Persian Empire, which was from India to Ethiopia, so that's virtually the whole known world that they're looking for beautiful women. Okay, so Rabbi Natan says, Job lived in the days of the kingdom of Sheba, as it is stated, and Sheba fell upon them and took them away in Job 1. Now, we don't know much about Sheba, but we do know that the queen of Sheba came to visit King Solomon. But where is Sheba? That we don't know. Is it in Africa? Is it somewhere in the Middle East? We really don't know where Sheba was. And the rabbis say Job lived in the days of the kingdom of the Chaldeans in the time of Nebuchadnezzar. As it stated, the Chaldeans formed three bands. That's also in Job. So maybe at the time of the exile to Babylonia, which also happens to be the time of King Ahasuerus too. And some say that Job lived in the days of Jacob and that he married Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. As it is written here, you speak as one of the loathsome women speaks in Job 2. And it's written there in the account of the incident involving Dinah, he has done a loathsome act in Israel. So it's Nevalah and Nevalot. So again, the rabbis always look for literary clues to make a connection to try to find an answer. So maybe he lived at the time of Jacob. This concludes the text of the Baraita. The Gemara comments, and all these Tanaim hold that Job was a Jew, except for the opinion introduced with the phrase, and some say, according to which Job lived in the time of Jacob, and he was certainly not one of Jacob's sons. And what is the proof that all these Tanaim maintain that Job was Jewish? As if it should enter your mind to say that he came from the nations of the world, there's a difficulty. After Moses died, did the divine presence rest any longer on the nations of the world? But doesn't the Master say Moses requested that the divine presence not rest again on the nations of the world? And his request was granted to him. As it is stated that we shall be differentiated, I and your people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth. And it's stated there that God acceded to his request. Right? So it's in the book of Exodus that we find the idea that we are an Am Segula, a treasured nation or a chosen nation from among all the people. And so that the idea, this theological concept that we are God's chosen people, is from the time of Exodus, where the rabbis are suggesting before that time, it's possible that God's presence could have rested on all the peoples of all the world. And from then on, it's only on the Jewish people. So that's why there's a debate about Job. Was he from the other nations or was he Jewish? Rabbi Yochanan says the generation of Job was awash in licentiousness, as it is stated, behold, all of you yourselves have seen chazitem it. Why then have you become altogether vain? And it's written, return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look v'nechazeh upon you. Same root for looking and seeing, which teaches that the phrase you have seen it connotes a licentious gaze. The Gemara asks, but say that the phrase you yourselves have seen it signifies prophecy, as it is written, the vision of Isaiah ben Amoz. The Gemara answers, if so, why do I need the words, why then have you become altogether vain? Rather, the reference must be to inappropriate licentious gazing. And further, with regard to Rabbi Elazar's statement in the Baraita that the generation of the judging of the judges was one of vanity, Rabbi Yochanan says, what's the meaning of that which is written, and it happened in the days of the judging of the judges, from Ruth? This indicates a generation that judged its judges. If a judge would say to the defendant standing before him, remove the splinter from between your eyes, meaning rid yourself of some minor infraction, the defendant would say to him, remove the beam from between your eyes, meaning you have committed far more severe sins. If the judge would say to him, your silver is become dross, meaning your coins are counterfeit, the defendant would say to him, your wine is mixed with water, meaning you yourself dilute your wine with water and sell it. Since nobody behaved in proper manner, the judges were unable to judge. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says that Rabbi Yonatan says, anyone who says that the queen of Sheba, who came to visit King Solomon, was a woman, is nothing other than mistaken. What is the meaning of Malkat Sheva? The kingdom Malchuta of Sheva, as is mentioned in Job, and Sheba fell on them and took them away. So,
Rabbi,
yes.
I just tapped I Googled when the book of Job was written,
Yes.
according to scholars, and they think it was after the Babylonian exile with that Persian influence based on their language analysis and
Right,
so
right.
forth.
So
So,
yes. So there is scholarship like that. Yes. So one element of biblical scholarship is based on the Hebrew language itself, the kind of words that are used and the style. And scholars have tried to um, um, suggest that you see throughout the Bible kind of an evolution of the Hebrew language. And so, yes, um, so that is one way of trying to understand when the book was written. Yeah, but so for the rabbis, though, that doesn't matter. What matters to them is more the spiritual and religious lessons that they're trying to learn from the book itself. And so, you know, it was never discussed, or at least it's never recorded in the Gemara or in the Mishnah when they're trying to figure out which books of the Bible should be in the Bible and which books should not be in the Bible. No one ever says that Job should not be in the Bible, which, because there are questions about God and God's decisions that arise in the book of Job. And but because the book ends with God speaking to Job, do you know who I am? Do you know all the mysteries of the world? And it lists a bunch of things. Do you know when when it's mating season for the animals? Do you understand Leviathan, the huge sea creature, things like that? So because of that, that's mainly why the book of Job is included in the Bible. But again, the rabbis will use language to, as we saw in this midrash, just a hint of it, they'll see a word in Job and a similar word in some other story, and that will be the connection for them. Even though, from a scholarship perspective, the Hebrew in Job is of a different kind than Hebrew of earlier books in the Bible. So there are many words in the book of Job that appear only in the book of Job and no place else in the Bible, which makes it very difficult to translate. So if anybody is trying to study the book of Job, not just read it through an English translation, but to try to study it and really understand the words, there's lots of footnotes with lots of words in Job, which, like the classic Jewish Publication Society, will have a footnote, meaning of Hebrew uncertain. And that happens a lot throughout the book of Job. So, but for the rabbis, Job is important for the religious lessons it teaches, not for the scholarship. I have on my shelf a number of editions of the book of Job, and one series which I just took from my father because he didn't need it anymore, and I've had this series called the Anchor Bible, which is this whole series of books are by biblical scholars in the 60s and in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, writing about the up to the moment biblical scholarship about that particular book that they're writing about. So Marvin Pope, who wrote the Anchor Bible series on the book of Job, is one of these classic, one of the classic Bible scholars. Now, I just want to show you one thing, that the book of Job is 40 chapters, 40 some odd chapters long, and the scholarly edition of it is this big. The book of Song of Songs is 8 chapters long, and the scholarly edition of Song of Songs is this big. So, and it happens to be the same scholar who wrote both books. So, Song of Songs look at all the scholarship about the Song of Songs. Why does an 8-chapter book require so much scholarship? You would think the idea of good and evil that the book of Job presents should be as thick as Song of Songs, if not thicker. So and that's a whole other question for a Bible class as opposed to a Talmud class.
I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
The Satan,
Yeah.
is that the first time he appears in a biblical book named Satan, or is there other places earlier?
So the Satan in Hebrew is spelled with the letter shin, sin, and the letter tet and the letter nun. So as a verb to like be an adversary, that verb appears elsewhere in the Bible. But just a second. Yeah, my daughter was FaceTiming me. But as a verb, Satan that appears as to confront or to be an adversary. But as a name of a person or as an angel, it's the first time in the book of Job. Satan appears in the Christian Bible, in the Christian biblical books, but this is the only Hebrew Bible where Satan appears. But Satan appears a ton in Midrash, a ton, and lots of angels appear in Midrash. And it would be fascinating to do a study, which I'm sure has been done, to compare Christian view of angels versus rabbinic view of angels and their purpose and what they do and talking to God, etc. I mean, there's angels appear in the rabbinic interpretations of the Passover story. It's like why we dip our finger into the cup of wine as we and do a drop for each of the 10 plagues. Why should we be sad that Egyptians died? Because of the midrash that the angels were rejoicing at the crossing of the sea, and God says to the angels, "How can you rejoice when my children are dying in the sea?" So the rabbis use angels for teaching lessons to us about it, about God, about history and God's role in history, et cetera, et cetera. So Satan, yes, it's the first time, as far as I can tell offhand, that Satan appears in the Jewish Bible is in the book of Job.
I wonder if it's a reaction to the Persian religion that had sort of an evil god and a good god.
Yeah, so Zoroastrianism, which is two gods, one of good and one of evil. I'm not sure when that started, and did it start in this time, that is, in the time of the Bible, so that would be about 2,500 years ago, or was it sooner than that, like closer to our time? So I don't know. You can Google Zoroastrianism and when it was founded to see if it had an impact on the rabbis. Because the Talmud, the rabbis of the Talmud, that's 200 to 500 CE. If Zoroastrianism was around in Persia at the time, then definitely it had an impact then. Before that time, I'm not sure, because most of the rabbis were living in the land of Israel before the year 200. So I'm not sure what impact Zoroastrianism would have had on those rabbis. But
It says, I just Googled it. It said 6th or 7th BCE.
6th to 7th century BCE.
Yeah.
So it was around. Okay. So, so absolutely had an impact, but we don't know for sure. Like we don't have documents that said that I don't know. Some rabbi sat down with a Zoroastrian priest and had a dialogue. We don't have that in writing. We can imagine, and there's been historical fiction like I don't know if you've read those books, Rashi's Daughters. There's that historical fiction by Margie Anton, I think is her name. She wrote about Rashi having in France 1,000 years ago contact with the neighboring, the local Catholic priest. Who knows? Who knows? It could be, it could make sense that rabbis in the Middle Ages had contact like that, but we don't know. We don't know for sure. We know for sure Rashi knew French, but does that mean then just knowing French means that you had contact with a priest as opposed to just a local people when you're selling your wine at the weekly fair? I, I really don't know. Okay, so now this red S. Having mentioned the book of Job, the Gemara addresses several matters relating to it. So this is just how the editor of the Talmud works. He has this bunch of material about the book of Job. Where am I going to put this material? We don't have a section of the Talmud devoted to the book of Job, so we got to put it in somewhere. It's worthy enough for the editor to have it in the Talmud, so you gotta fit it in some place where some topic comes up that, oh, this is related to that topic. I'll put all this midrash here. Okay, so because what does this have to do with splitting property between right? We all started about dividing a Bible scroll. And between two sons as an inheritance, where can you divide the Torah, this Bible scroll? Okay. Having mentioned the book of Job, the Gemara addresses several matters relating to it. It is stated, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the Satan came also among them. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? And the Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking through it. The Satan said to God, Master of the universe, I have gone to and fro throughout the entire world, and I have not found anyone as faithful as your servant Abraham, to whom you said, arise, walk through the land in the length of it, and in the breadth of it, for I will give it to you. And even so, when he did not find a place to bury Sarah before he purchased a burial site for 400 silver shekels, he did not find fault with your ways or complain about the fact that you had failed to fulfill your promise. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a perfect and upright man, one who fears God and turns away from evil? And about this, Rabbi Yochanan says, that which is stated about Job is greater than that which is stated about Abraham. As with regard to Abraham, it is written, for now I know that you fear God, in Genesis 22. With regard to Job, it's written, a perfect and upright man, one who fears God and turns away from evil. The Gemara clarifies the meaning of the aforementioned verse. What is meant by and turns away from evil? Rabbi Abba Bar Shmuel says Job was forgiving with his money. It's the way of the world that one pays the storekeeper for even half a pruta of merchandise purchased from him. But if somebody bought an item of such little value from Job, he would forgive him his half pruta. The Gemara continues to clarify the verses concerning Job. Then the Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for naught? Have you not made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his cattle is increased in the land. In other words, Satan's argument to God is, it's easy for someone to be righteous when they're wealthy. Everything's going good, so that nothing bad has happened to him. What is meant by you have blessed the work of his hands? Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak says, anyone who took a pruta from Job was blessed. Not only was Job's own handiwork blessed, but anybody who received anything from him was also blessed. The Gemara continues with its explication of these verses. What is meant by, and his livestock is increased in the land? Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says Job's livestock breached the order of the world. It's the way of the world that wolves kill goats. But in the case of Job's livestock, the goats killed the wolves. That's how successful And blessed Job was that his livestock was able to kill the preying animals, whereas wolves always kill sheep, not Job's sheep. Job's sheep or goats were able to kill the wolves. It's kind of like what comes to mind are these cartoons, like those Looney Tune cartoons of like wolves dressing up in sheep's clothing to try to get to the sheep or whatever. The Gemara continues to relate Satan's challenge to God. But now put forth your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power, only upon himself do not put forth your hand. And Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So in other words, God is letting Satan have his way. Satan's scheme is, he's so righteous because he's so wealthy. What will happen if afflictions come to him? And God says, okay, Satan, you have all the power to do whatever you want to Job. Just don't afflict Job himself. Don't kill Job, but you can do anything else to him. The verses relate what then occurred. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses were feeding beside them. The Gemara asks, what is meant by the oxen were plowing and the asses were feeding beside them? Rabbi Yochanan says, it teaches that the Holy One, blessed be he, gave Job a taste of the world to come, when plowing and harvesting will take place at the same time. Here too, the oxen plowed and the donkeys grazed on the crops that grew from that effort. The Gemara continues to interpret verses from the book of Job. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the fire of God has fallen from heaven and has burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands and fell among the camels and have carried them away and have slain the servants with the edge of the sword. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from across the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they were dead. Then Job arose, rent his coat, shaved his head, fell down on the ground, and prostrated himself. And he said, I came naked out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Okay, so that's where that verse comes from, right? That's a verse I always recite with mourners as we cut the ribbon and put the ribbon on their garment for the first time before the funeral service starts. We say the blessing, Dayan Ha'emet, and then we say this verse from Job, the Lord is given, the Lord is taken away, blessed be the name of the Lord. That, in other words, Job's righteousness, all this suffering that he suffered, and he's not blaming God for it. In all this, Job sinned not, nor did he lay reproach on God. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before God. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down it. Satan said before God, Master of the universe, I have gone to and fro across the entire world, and have not found anyone as faithful as your servant Abraham, to whom you said, arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it to you. And when he wanted to bury Sarah, he could not find a place to bury her, and yet he did not criticize your ways or accuse you of having failed to keep your promise. About this it says, and the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him on the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that fears God and turns away from evil? And still he holds fast to his integrity, although you move me against him to destroy him without cause. Rabbi Yochanan says, were it not explicitly written in the verse, it would be impossible to say this, as it would be insulting to God's honor. The verse states, you moved me against him like a person whom others persuade and allows himself to be persuaded, as if God had not wanted to do anything, but allowed himself to be persuaded to bring harm to God. So, right, that's just there's a question here about the book, and how dare anyone say that God could be God's mind could be changed by Satan, as if God hadn't planned this all ahead of time. It was taught in a Baraita with regard to the methods of Satan. He descends to this world and misleads a person into sinning. He then ascends to heaven, levels accusations against that very sinner, and inflames God's anger against him. He then receives permission to act and takes away the sinner's soul as punishment. The Gemara returns to discuss the text of the book of Job, right? So here's an idea then of what, from the rabbis, of what the role of Satan is, that he works in this world and in God's world, like in God's court, to conspire against humanity, causes humanity to sin, and then makes it worse for humanity by talking against humanity in God's presence. The Gemara returns to discuss the text of the book of Job, and the Satan answered the Lord and said, skin, for all that a man has he will give for his life. But put forth your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he's in your hand, only spare his life. Right? So it's not enough that Job proved his righteousness by, despite the fact that all his property was destroyed and his children were killed, he still praised God. He said God is willing to go an extra step with Satan's scheme by allowing Satan to afflict Job's body, but making sure that Satan doesn't kill Job. He's in your hand, only spare his life. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with vile sores from the sole of his foot to his crown. Rabbi Yitzchak says Satan's suffering was more difficult than that of Job. This can be explained by means of a parable involving a servant whose master said to him, break the barrel, but save its wine. Here too, Job told the Satan that he could do whatever he liked short of taking Job's life, and that limitation caused Satan to suffer. Reish Lakish says, Satan, the evil inclination, and the angel of death are one. That is, they are three aspects of the same essence. Okay, so there are lots of stories in Midrash about Satan, lots of stories about the evil inclination, lots of stories about the angel of death. And so Reish Lakish, who's a rabbi around the transition time between the Mishnah and the Gemara, like around the year 200 or so, or the 3rd century, he suggests Satan, evil inclination, angel of death are all one and the same. He is the Satan who seduces people and then accuses them, as it is written, so Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with vile sores. He's also the evil inclination, as it's written there, the impulse of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continuously, and it's written here, only upon himself do not put forth your hand. The verbal analogy between the various uses of the word only teaches that the evil inclination is to be identified with Satan. He's also the angel of death, as it's written, only spare his life. Apparently Job's life depends upon him, the Satan, and accordingly Satan must also be the angel of death. Rabbi Levi says both Satan, who brought accusations against Job, and Peninnah, who tormented Hannah, mother of Samuel the prophet, acted with intent that was for the sake of heaven. As for Satan, when he saw that the Holy One, blessed be he, inclined to favor Job and praised him, he said, heaven forbid that he should forget the love of Abraham. With regard to Peninnah, as it's written, and her rival wife also provoked her sore to make her fret, that is, Peninnah upset Hannah in order to motivate her to pray. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov taught that this is in Pafunya, and Satan and kissed, Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov taught this in Pafunya, and Satan came and kissed his feet in gratitude for speaking positively about him. Okay, so how do we know that? How do we know that Satan came and kissed Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov's feet? Right? What did Satan look like, and what was that all about? We don't know, but there are a lot of stories like that of accounts of rabbis' encounters with angels, with the angel of death, with Elijah, with Satan. It's all for teaching teaching this story. The Gemara considers the character of Job. The verse states, in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Rava says a close reading of the verse indicates that he did not sin with his lips, but he sinned in his heart. What did he say that suggests that he had wicked thoughts? The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If not he, then who is it? Rava says Job sought to turn the bowl upside down. That is to say, he alluded here to a heretical thought, as he said that the earth is given into the hand of the wicked, indicating that he had God in mind. Abaye said to him, Job was referring here only to Satan, he being the wicked one into whose hands the land was given. The Gemara comments, this is parallel to a dispute between the Tanaim, as it was taught in the Baraita, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Rabbi Eliezer says Job sought to turn the bowl upside down. Rabbi Yoshua said to him, Job was referring here only to the Satan. The Gemara continues to discuss Job's statements. Although you know that I am not wicked, and there is none that can deliver out of your hand. Rava says Job sought to exempt the whole world from judgment, claiming that all of a person's actions are directed by God, and therefore one cannot be held culpable for his misdeeds. Job said before God, Master of the universe, you created the ox with split hooves, making it kosher, and you created the donkey with closed hooves, making it forbidden. You created the Garden of Eden, and you created Gehenna. That is a rabbinic idea of hell. And similarly, you created righteous people and you created wicked people. Who can restrain you? Seeing that you created people as either righteous or wicked, you cannot later complain about their actions. How did Job's friends answer him? You do away with fear and impaired devotion before God with such statements. True, the Holy One, blessed be He, created the evil inclination, but He also created the Torah as an antidote to counter its effects and prevent it from gaining control of a person. Right? So this
Excuse me?
Yeah, go ahead, Bess.
Back the last sentence of the previous paragraph, that God created wicked people. We're supposed to accept that.
Right.
They can't do they can't get out of it. I thought there was free will.
Right. So, I mean, this is just a story about how to understand why there are wicked people in the world. Are wicked people wicked because they have free will? Or if you say that God kind of controls everything in the world, including our actions, then God controls the fact that there is a Hitler, like God created Hitler, and God also created Abraham. So, right, so how do we understand it? So the rabbis aren't necessarily consistent in saying that there is free will to answer the question about why some people are wicked, or they're not consistent that God has all the power in the world and there is no free will at all. They go back and forth like that. And this story is just one example of many in trying to teach a lesson about wicked people and wicked in the world, evil in the world. Okay, and so here this Torah is an antidote to counter the effects of evil in the world. So you live a life of Torah, then that should provide some sense of protection from the effects of evil around us and on us. Rava interpreted a verse homiletically. What is the meaning of that which is written, Job saying about himself, the blessing of him that was lost came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. The blessing of him that was lost came upon me teaches that Job used to steal a field from orphans, cultivate it, improve it, and then return it to them. Consequently, they would bless him for the field they had lost. I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy teaches that anywhere that there was a widow whom no one would marry, he would go and cast his name upon her. That is, he would start a rumor that she was related to him, and then somebody would come forward and marry her. Job further said, Oh, that my vexation were thoroughly weighed and my calamity laid in the balances. Rav says, dust should be put in the mouth of Job, meaning he should not have spoken in such a manner, as if he were weighing his deeds against those of Job. May one act as if he is in a friendship with heaven? And similarly, Job said, there is no arbiter between us who may lay his hand upon us both. Rav says, dust should be put in the mouth of Job for saying this. Is there a servant who rebukes his master? Job also said, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a virgin? Rava says, dust should be put in the mouth of Job for saying this. He did not look at other women, but Abraham did not even look at his own wife. As it is written, now I know that you are a beautiful woman. One may learn by inference that initially he did not know how beautiful she was because he had not gazed at her. Job further said, as the cloud is consumed and vanishes away, so he who goes down to the grave shall come up no more. Rava says, from here it may be inferred that Job denied the resurrection of the dead, as he said that one who goes down to the grave will not come up and live again, just as a cloud that dissipates will not return. He also stated, he crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. Rabbah says Job blasphemed with mention of a tempest, and he was answered with mention of a tempest. Rabbah explains, he blasphemed with mention of a tempest, as it is written, he crushes me with a tempest. Job said before God, Master of the universe, but perhaps a tempest passed before you and you confused Eov, Job, with Oyev, enemy. Right? So in Hebrew, Eov is Aleph, Yud, Vav, Bet. Oyev is Aleph, Vav, Yud, Bet. Same letters, the two middle ones are just transposed. He was answered with mention of a tempest, as it is written, then the Lord answered Job out of the tempest and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now your loins like a man, for I will demand of you, and let me know your answer. What is the meaning of out of the tempest? God said to him, I have created many hairs on a person, and for each hair I created its own follicle, through which the hair is sustained, so that two hairs should not draw from one follicle. As were two hairs to draw from one follicle, they would impair a man's vision. Now, if I do not confuse one follicle with another, would I confuse Eov with Oyev? The Hebrew word for tempest, se'ara, is phonetically identical to the Hebrew word for hair. Okay? Yeah, so, but se'ara is spelled with a samach, and hair is spelled with the letter sin. But for the rabbis, that's okay. It sounds the same, so it could still be the same word. Okay, so I'm not sure how much longer this Job stuff continues, but it's 20 after, and we should stop here because I have to get ready for my next thing. So we'll stop here for today. The next 2 Sundays, we do not have class. Both of next 2 Sundays are Yontiv. Next Sunday, the first day of Pesach. The following Sunday, the 8th day of Pesach and Yizkor. So we'll meet again in 3 weeks. That would be April 27th. April 27th will be our next class. So have a good day, everybody, and have a happy and joyous Passover.
Happy Passover, everybody.
Take care all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Be
Bye.
too simplistic to